Mr. Pell? Mr. Pell?
Secretary Thomson. Didn't see you there. Fine morning?
Mr. Pell? You know what day it is?
A Monday, I believe.
The date, ma'am, the date.
It's the 2nd of March.
Precisely, Mr. Pell. Precisely. The newly elected Congress of the United States of America is set to commence in 2 days.
That's true, Mr. Secretary, but I won't be there. And neither will you.
You're missing the point, man.
Apologies.
So,
So,
Mr. Pell, has it occurred to anyone that unless we dissolve this Continental Congress, there will be 2 legitimate governments of these United States come Wednesday?
dissolve Congress. Secretary Thomson, what Congress? The president resigned in November. We have not held quorum this entire session.
And?
And?
Do you mean to imply, Mr. Pell, that by simply not meeting and ignoring the matter, we can just end the Continental Congress of 15 years?
Why not?
Why not?
I see. You'd like to dissolve the Congress formally.
Brilliant deduction, Mr. Pell. I would like to dissolve the Congress formally.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I am in full support.
You are?
Yes.
Mr. Pell, please come with me to Federal Hall and help me dissolve the Congress.
Very well, Mr. Secretary. I shall accompany you.
Well, Mr. Pell, as the most senior member of Congress present, you are the presiding officer.
Me? How am I the more senior of the two of us?
Because, Mr. Pell, I am not a member of Congress.
That's ridiculous. You are Congress.
Mr. Pell, it would surprise you to know that I have never been a member of Congress.
Mr. Thomson, you were elected secretary at the very first session of the Continental Congress. You've been secretary for every session since, and I'm to believe you were not even a member.
Yes, you are to believe that, Mr. Pell. By House rules, the secretary need not be a member of Congress, and I have not been. So, please, preside.
I move to dissolve this Congress.
So, a couple of things.
Yes.
Firstly, while presiding, one should never use the pronoun I. You should refer to yourself simply as the chair.
I see. The chair means the chair sees, of course.
Secondly, there is no such motion.
So why did you drag me all the way here?
As presiding officer, you must first call for a quorum.
Very well. Mr. Thompson, do we have a quorum?
I will read out the names. Mr. Barnwell of South Carolina. Mr. Barnwell is absent. Mr. Cox of Pennsylvania. Mr. Cox is absent. Mr. Dawson.
Please, Mr. Thompson, can we proceed?
Mr. Chairman, we do not have the required quorum.
Very well. Congress dismissed.
Please, Mr. Pell, I'm a busy man. Do not joke.
What on earth do you want to do now?
We can now entertain motions on adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
It must be seconded.
Well, there they have us, Mr. Thompson. I suppose we'll never be able to shut down the government. I am off.
Wait. There's another method. As chair, you can declare the agenda of this Congress completed.
Then I do so.
Now you can declare this Congress adjourned.
I henceforth do.
Until when?
Until never.
Very well. This Congress is adjourned sine die. I will transmit the journal of this Congress to the new federal government.
I tell you, Secretary Thomson, that was one of the most thoroughly traumatizing incidents of my life.
Have a drink, Mr. Pell. Confederation Congress is at an end. "15 years. 15 years I've kept that book."
Incredible.
So where are you off to next, sir?
Oh, I'll go home to Pelham Manor.
No, but you've only just got here. Care you not to serve the new government?
I oppose this new government with all my heart, Mr. Thompson. Imagine it. 7 ruddy years of war. I was in New York. I remember what it was like to evacuate New York City in the army, and for what? So we could elect General Washington dictator after just 10 years? It's ridiculous. No, Mr. Thompson, no. I will head home.
I disagree, sir. That General Washington gained power not by coup d'etat, but by popular election. He must be re-elected every 4 years. It is most proper to provide an executive function.
Well, the Continental Congress may not have been particularly effective, but don't forget, we've managed to ratify a major treaty, coordinate 2 executive departments, and pass visionary legislation in the Northwest Ordinance. No singular executive was required.
Surely you cannot believe that Congress did those things.
Then who?
Me, mostly. As secretary, I coordinate much of the legislation. I receive all letters and correspondences from the states. I transmit instruction to our foreign ambassadors. I'm currently monitoring Mr. Jefferson and our embassy to France, where there are some extremely delicate maneuverings underway to steer clear of the rising political upheaval. Our Dutch embassy must still secure loans for the country. And I just spent an entire winter with Congress completely lacking in quorum, supervising elections for the new Congress. It's much to be done, and only one man to do it.
Well, at least, Mr. Thompson, in 2 days there will be a powerful behemoth government to help you.
2 days? No, the new Congress will not meet in 2 days.
Excuse me?
Mr. Pell, have you ever known an American Congress to achieve quorum on the first call?
Well, I'd have thought many would be eager to serve in such a powerful body.
Not enough legislators have arrived. Congress will not achieve quorum on Wednesday.
So why did we shut down this government? Can we open it back up?
This government is over, Mr. Pell.
So who's in charge until the quorum of the new Congress?
Well, I suppose I am. Same way I've been for the last 4 months. Mr. Jay is still serving as our Secretary of Foreign Affairs. The Board of Finance still exists. Mr. Knox is still Secretary at War. We can run a caretaker government.
Well, I'd offer to help, but I must return to Pelham Manor. Will you have a role in the new government?
If they want me, I suppose. First Secretary of the Senate, maybe. Secretary of State, perhaps, maybe an appropriate role. A political actor like myself is needed to ensure procedure and progress.
Well, surely any role would be an insult to a man of your stature, Secretary Thompson. But farewell. I must be going.
Well, sir, thank you for your help. It was an important statement to history that Congress bothered to adjourn.
You say so. You never answered my question. How did you come to be Secretary of Congress?
Ah, Mr. Pell, that was long, long ago.
New to the city, sir.
Very much so, sir. I arrived just today from Boston. Be you a native?
Not at all. I arrived from Virginia just a couple of weeks ago, but I've learned my way around the city.
I'm trying to find the Dickinson residence.
And so am I curious. Who might you be, sir?
I'm the lawyer, Mr. Adams of Boston.
The famous Samuel Adams.
No, sir. John Adams, the less famous of the Adams family.
I quite sympathize, Mr. Adams.
You do? Who are you anyway?
Well, I'm Richard Henry Lee.
So you're one of the Lees of Virginia. It is a pleasure to meet you. I hope Virginia will stand with Massachusetts in its struggle.
Rather, I hope Massachusetts will support Virginia in its struggle against the British.
What struggle? While Massachusetts men have been punished, the rest of the colonies have been going about their lives as if nothing is the matter.
Pardon me, sir. It was the Virginia House of Burgesses that was dissolved by our governor. We had to meet in a tavern.
Oh, a tavern. Oh dear, that sounds dreadful. I'll have you know, sir, the Massachusetts legislature has been closed ever since the late Intolerable Acts were passed.
Well, Virginia, as the oldest colony in the States.
If you call what they formed a colony.
Virginia, which has gained this country prosperity through agriculture.
Of luxury crops.
Virginia is the foremost colony.
Massachusetts is the heart of the continent, an exemplar to live by. I'd say the rest of the colonies ought to take some notes.
How dare you? I like you, Boston. Let's show that fighting spirit to the British, huh?
Well, we're glad to have the support of Virginia.
Come.
Mr. Adams, Mr. Lee, a pleasure to host you both.
Mr. Dickinson, we're honored to meet you. Your letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania inspired us all.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed Philadelphia, the finest city in the finest colony on the continent. Hopefully, we'll be able to find some equitable solution to our present problems. Come in, come in.
Don't worry, Mr. Adams. Once we were finished with the Tories, the rest of the Pennsylvanians will come next.
Ah, Secretary Thompson. Still calling roll on an empty Congress?
I could ask you the same, Senator Lee. Federal Congress still hasn't had quorum yet. At some point it has to happen, right? Senator. Must be rather monarchical for such a prominent anti-federalist.
I'll have you know we'll produce amendments to the Constitution. And you, for such a prominent conservative, it must be frustrating to know that you'll forever be associated with the Confederation Congress.
I've never been anything but thorough, Mr. Lee, but yes, there is sweet irony in knowing that you serve my ideal government and I run yours.
No longer you don't, it seems.
Beg your pardon?
The Senate achieved quorum today.
Well, congratulations. Only took a month.
And with that quorum, we are ready to assume governance of the country.
Our mouths are all agape in anticipation, Senator.
Do not snipe, Mr. Thompson. We have counted the electoral votes from the previous presidential election.
Have I been elected?
No, Mr. Thompson. General Washington has been elected, as expected.
Well, good for him.
As a symbol of the transition from the old government to the new, we'd like you to ride down to Mount Vernon to inform General Washington of his election.
Well, uncharacteristically for you, Senator, that is an incredibly appropriate gesture. I will be delighted to ride down to Virginia.
Good. Good. Good day, former Secretary Thompson.
Senator, has the Senate had a chance to choose a secretary?
We'll vote tomorrow. Mr. Otis of Massachusetts is a very appropriate candidate.
I see. Mr. Otis is a fine man. But such an institution as the Senate must have a secretary of incredible experience.
Are you saying, Mr. Thompson, that you want to be considered? I believe that just weeks ago you were expecting a cabinet position from the new president.
Well, I've reconsidered.
Have you? And what else can we offer the great Charles Thomson? I suppose you have some alterations to the office to make it worthy of such a figure of yourself.
Now that you mention it.
He's serious.
I thought an appropriate role would be to be Secretary of the Senate, Secretary of the House, and coordinate the administrative duties of the entire government.
Mr. Thompson, my good friend, Mr. James Madison of Virginia.
Hardly your good friend.
James Madison spent months creating a system of checks and balances such that no branch of government becomes too powerful through separation. We spent years ratifying it.
You spent years fighting against it being ratified.
And now, Secretary Charles Thomson thinks that he can subsume all administrative duties of all branches? Tiresome King Charlie you'd become.
Checks and balances are for political actors. I'm above politics.
The ludicrousness of that statement, sir, I cannot even fathom. How would you even have time to run the entire government?
It should be easy. I should procure an assistant, possibly Mr. William Jackson, to do the ordinary business of the Senate so that I might not be under the necessity of attending, except on special occasions and when the great business of the nation is under deliberation. I think I would be an appropriate choice, don't you, Senator Lee?
No. I cannot say I agree, Mr. Thompson. After all, I cannot trust that you would treat the office with any seriousness.
The same office that I've held for the past 15 years?
You've constantly turned your position into a political one.
That's just a lie.
The Senate will consider your nomination, but I am opposed.
Well, luckily for me, you're a minority in Congress, Senator Lee. The anti-federalists have lost.
They may be federalists, Mr. Thompson, but the Tory era has passed.
Good thing I'm not a Tory then. Anyway, I'll be off. I have matters to settle before I leave for Virginia.
You must face facts, Mr. Thompson. You're not the busiest man in the world anymore. John Jay works for us now. Foreign correspondence is in our hands.
Really?
Yes, really.
And what have been the recent appeals of the King of France to us? What are the impacts on trade of a new Ottoman Sultan? How is Great Britain involved in the Scandinavian War? What are the instructions for our agents in Great Britain following the departure of Ambassador Adams? How have we resolved Virginia's claims in the Western Territory? Oh, never mind. I'll sort it out when I return.
He's never been with us, has he?
I fear, Mr. Vice President-elect, this is Dickinson's Conservative Party trying to reassert power in our new republic.
That can't be allowed.
Don't worry. Mr. Otis will become secretary.
We'll deal with Dickinson and Thompson like we dealt with the rest of the Pennsylvanians, shall we?
And we have an advantage, sir.
What is it?
We're no longer in Pennsylvania. We're in New York now.
It's no Massachusetts.
Huh. Maybe not. But Philadelphia moderation has no place here. And no more does the likes of Secretary Charles Thomson.
Poor Charles has got himself a job as an express writer.
Last job for this government he'll ever hold.
Well, it's been a long time a-coming. Ever since Dickinson spoke out against independency, Pennsylvania has been in decline.
And the Lee Adams Pact? On the rise, sir.
Indeed.
The red? Yes, the red suit would be appropriate for such a meeting. It's formal, it's official. The red suit works. Perhaps this occasion calls for something more understated. A brown suit, perhaps. It's professional. It says, "This is a momentous occasion and I am treating it with the proper seriousness." This is ridiculous. I'm going to Virginia, so I'll need a thin blue suit. That's my style anyway. The general might not recognize me otherwise. Anyway, I'll be riding for days, so I'll need the suits and these boots. And why are you in such a flutter, Charlie? You've met General Washington many times. When you first met him, he was just a quiet delegate from Virginia, and you were the Secretary of Congress. And now he'll be the most powerful man in the country, and I must be heading out. What a day it was when he was nominated to lead the army.
Mr. Thompson, please vote on my motion to send more supplies to the aid of the militiamen in Boston.
A second.
Mr. Lee, such a motion does not require a second. It simply requires a majority that is stunningly absent, as apparent from the last set of votes on this matter.
We're sympathetic to Massachusetts, Adams. Surely we are, but we simply don't have the funds. Procedure says we must requisition the states for funds first.
Funds, Dickinson, there's a war on, and you're worried about funds?
At some point, the colonies have to take ownership of this war. Together.
Perhaps we'd be more eager to take ownership if the flames weren't constantly fanned by radicals.
Suppose we nominated a general to take command of the colonial army?
Mr. Adams, is Massachusetts unhappy with the leadership of General Ward?
Not at all. But if we are to have a colonial army, we need a general representing the nation as a whole.
I'd suppose you'd pick a Pennsylvanian.
If you're hoping for the appointment, Franklin, I'd lose some weight.
I was thinking a Virginian.
I have just the men in mind. General Charles Lee.
He's not even a member of the Lee family.
No one will be able to tell.
I was thinking Colonel George Washington.
A superb choice.
Mr. Thompson, call the vote.
In which order? There are 2 nominees.
Well, as secretary, that is up to my discretion.
Mr. Adams, please. You know I can't vote against Washington from my home state, but Lee is the better choice.
Mr. Thompson, your decision?
All in favor of General George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Colonial Army?
Aye.
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 Now, if we could return to my motion on ammunition and one on independence.
Mr. Adams, we've just made an extraordinary move. Perhaps we should take some time to pacify our state delegations and assemblies. A motion to table.
Mr. Dickinson, if you want our troops, yes, our troops now, to continue fighting with no supplies, you must go on the record and vote against it. Enough tabling and delaying. Mr. Thompson, a vote.
We'll vote on Mr. Dickinson's motion to table.
I protest. I requested a final vote first.
Mr. Adams, now if we could return to my motion is not a request for a vote. Mr. Dickinson's motion comes first.
How can you lot live with such dysfunction? I'm sick of this colony.
People are dying in Virginia and Massachusetts, while all you all worry about is politics.
Well, mostly Massachusetts.
I am in full agreement.
Of course you are.
Gentlemen, we must proceed in the proper order. Or the day Congress finally declared independence.
Independency is a mistake, gentlemen. This may be the finishing blow to my once considerable but now much diminished popularity. But I must speak. We're riding the rapids in a skiff made of paper.
The vote is tomorrow. It must be unanimous to carry.
Finally.
So we finally made it, eh, Charlie?
To the great relief of the Massachusetts delegation, for sure. I'm afraid you're not going to carry this one, John. You can block unanimous vote, but procedure says the motion will pass.
Now think what would have happened, Charlie, if Mr. Adams had got it in his quick vote.
It would have failed on the spot.
That's why, Mr. Thompson, that's why we go through the legislative procedure. No person, no matter their convictions, can avoid the legislative crucible.
Well, Congress needs your guidance.
Oh, not mine, Mr. Thompson. With my stance on this issue, my voice for procedure will no longer be heard. It is you who must keep Congress in line.
Not me, surely.
They may call you the secretary, but you are the nanny to this Congress. They're all little boys. Brilliant little boys, but boys nonetheless. They want what they want, and they want it now. And they shatter the country itself to get it.
Well, there is no proceeding without the procedure.
I know, sir, that you'll proceed in a way that proves to the monarchies of Europe that listening to the people doesn't mean throwing out the rule of law, that someone is in charge.
Are you certain to take this stand against independency, John?
I can't betray my conscience. But I won't deny this country her unanimous vote.
Since Mr. Dickinson has absented himself, the Pennsylvania delegation votes yay.
Coward.
Mr. Adams, impugning another member of Congress, is ruled out of order. The Declaration on Independence will now be debated.
Looks like summer is coming early this year. Unseasonably hot. Or
have you just lost track of the seasons, John?
Charlie Thompson. As I live and breathe.
Barely, it seems, sir.
I'll survive. But what are you doing here in Wilmington? I'd have thought you'd be in New York.
I'm headed down to Virginia to inform General Washington that he's being elected president.
Why?
Well, it was a very symbolic idea from the new Congress.
Charlie.
A type of transition from the old government to the new.
Charlie.
What?
Are you saying that Congress sent you to Virginia?
Yes. Why? Well, I am and hope to continue to be the Secretary to Congress. The new Senate will need a secretary as well.
Haven't you heard?
Heard what?
Samuel Otis was named Secretary of the Senate yesterday.
You mean I lost?
Didn't you consider it odd when all your old enemies in Congress decided to send you out of town the week before the vote?
They were just trying to get rid of me. Surely no one can think that Mr. Otis is more qualified to be secretary than I am.
Charlie, I am as disappointed as you are. But Mr. Otis is a great ally of the incoming vice president, John Adams. Surely the administrative officers of a legislative body must be in line with the leadership.
In line? My job is apolitical. My job has always been apolitical.
Calm down. Don't you deserve a peaceful retirement? You can write about the Bible. You can write your memoirs.
I'm not ready to retire.
If you say so.
Really, Johnny, I'm not. Neither are you. You still have so much to give to this country.
You can't be serious. I have no desire to serve in public office anymore. My health is failing. I'm happy with my work for the relief of the unhappy in our society. Assisting with the ratification of this incredible Constitution should be my last act in public life.
The Constitution is adequate, but incredible?
It's magnificent, Charlie. The care we took to lay the burden of power equally on the shoulders of many men, so not one could usurp it completely, nor another lay it down. It was masterful.
I don't know, Johnny. I know legislatures. if the goal was to solve the problems of the Confederation Congress, where each bill required an almost unattainable vote, the answer can't be to require each bill to traverse a Byzantine structure of two separate houses.
The two-house structure provides a safeguard against the misuse of all the power we've placed in the legislature.
I've been to enough failed Congresses to know that two houses means twice the opportunity for a lack of quorum.
Did you ever consider that the dysfunction of Congress was the reason people didn't bother to show up? When the cause is just and the tools sharp and clean, every man will step up to lend a hand.
And who will nanny the Congress, John? Who will prove to the world that America is more than temperamental congressional children? Who will ensure that they follow the rules, not rush to conclusions?
General Washington will. I have trust in the president.
So there might be a role for me in the government yet.
No.
It may be George Washington can use about credibility.
Charlie.
I think we need a home office like they have in the Great Britain, a truly administrative office.
How long can you stay, Charlie? I don't see you enough.
Sadly, Johnny, I have to continue south to reach George Washington. I'd like to stop in Philadelphia to see Dr. Franklin. He's on his last legs.
Franklin?
I know you've never seen eye to eye.
As a politician, he could be unprincipled. He glorified power instead of fighting it. He displayed his lavish wealth rather than living a lifestyle of moderation. But he is indeed the greatest American. His intellectualism legitimized our society of farmers. Well, goodbye, Charlie. And remember, there's more to life than public service.
Burning the midnight oil, Mr. Secretary.
Dr. Franklin, what brings you here at this hour?
Benjamin, I had wanted you to know first.
Know what?
I've decided to accept the post as minister to France.
Why? It's only been a few years since you returned from your long stay in England. Love you not your own country?
I love my country too much. That's why I'm constantly sailing for foreign lands on its behalf.
But Dr. Franklin.
Benjamin.
Congress is exhausted. We just returned to Philadelphia from York. Who will provide guidance on what to do next?
Why not you, Charles?
Me?
The congressmen are short-sighted. We've declared independence, but what is our nascent country to look like? You must set the agenda.
Isn't my role to be fair?
Your role is to promote the welfare of the nation, as it is for any officer in public life.
Will you be well, Dr. Franklin?
Don't worry about me, Charles.
I do worry about you. I was a poor Irish orphan in this city. You gave me my start in life. I would resign Congress to care for you if you needed it.
No man, Charles, should be worth more to you than your country. Come, walk me home.
A dispatch from our minister in France, Dr. Benjamin Franklin.
This is outrageous. My cousin Arthur has sent dozens of dispatches from France, and Mr. Thompson only ever reads the ones from Dr. Franklin.
I will now read the dispatch.
Mr. Thompson, Please account for Mr. Lee's allegations. Burying dispatches would be criminal for an officer of this Congress.
President Adams, I simply don't read redundant dispatches. Suppose Dr. Franklin describes an event and then Mr. Lee describes the same event. I would only read one dispatch.
Then why are they always from Dr. Franklin? Answer that.
Because, while Dr. Franklin's dispatches are clear and succinct, Mr. Lee tends to ramble endlessly.
That's because you intentionally garble my cousin's dispatches.
Further, Dr. Franklin's dispatches lead to the next item of business for setting up a country, while Mr. Lee engages in soporific backbiting. I will not allow us to be sidetracked from our long-term goals.
Mr. Thompson, your political agenda is clear. You've always supported the Conservative Party over the Revolutionary Party.
I'm just doing my job, and all of yours for that matter.
Read the dispatches from Mr. Lee.
I will read the dispatch I was about to read.
You insubordinate staffer. Do as he says.
From Dr. Benjamin Franklin, Paris.
Read the dispatches from Mr. Lee.
Will you hit me, Mr. President?
No, sir. I would not do you that service.
From Dr. Benjamin Franklin, Paris.
Is that you, William?
No, sir.
Ah, Prime Minister Thompson.
Generous, but yes, my ancient and affectionate friend.
Have you come to care for me, as promised?
I wish I could stay, sir, but I have promises to keep to the Congress.
I heard they insulted you greatly. You've been left off the inaugural committee. You're a common messenger to them.
Oh, don't worry about that. The government needs me. They have no experience in managing foreign affairs.
The British, they said the same thing. They'll learn.
Ridiculous. There needs to be constancy. No one else in government can provide that.
If foreign leaders expect constancy from our nascent republic, they're in for a surprise.
But truly, sir, how can we ask the King of England to deal with a government with no permanent officers? Simply a rotating political president and a rotating Congress can never project credibility.
On the contrary, my young friend, it's our it's our greatest strength. While the rest of the world is caught up in old dogmas, we can never be pinned down. We're agile. We're dynamic. That's the promise of America.
The president and Congress are all political.
A political office is an accountable office.
An apolitical office is an effective office. This country needs someone apolitical to manage its records, someone who outlasts the administration to create plans for the next 50 years, not just 5.
Charles.
Yes, sir.
You've done enough. The reproach often thrown upon republics is they're apt to be ungrateful.
Goodbye, Benjamin.
Are you going to call the session to order, President Lee?
Why bother?
Well, you have been elected president, Mr. Lee. I just called roll. We have a quorum.
It doesn't matter.
What on earth do you mean? We have matters to deal with apart from the Northwest Territories, which Congress is incredibly invested in. There are foreign affairs to manage. There are salaries to be paid.
Oh, we couldn't get the votes on a motion of any question relating to that. So just manage it.
Just a few years ago, you accused me of using partisanship in foreign policy, and now you're delegating all foreign policy to me?
I'm tired, Mr. Thompson. So just manage it.
Have you been waiting long, Mr. Thompson?
No, sir, not at all. I have some news to deliver to you from the Congress.
I've been elected president.
Yes, sir.
I was just about to go fox hunting. Will you join me?
Yes. I'll be honest with you, sir, the state of the nation's not good at the moment. The debts of the state governments are more extensive than has been elsewhere reported. And furthermore, sir, I don't know if you've been following the incredibly troubling developments in France. The world could be at war again sooner than we know it.
I'm sure we'll sort it out soon enough.
It's not just that, sir. The new Secretary of the Senate knew it his job. Someone needs to manage the Great Seal. Someone needs to maintain continuity and credibility in government.
And by your message, Congress thinks I can do that?
Yes, sir, I think you do an excellent job, but I was wondering.
Wondering what?
I was wondering if you had any further use for me.
I think that by asking you to deliver this message, Congress has asked you to do enough.
I see.
I think we should be on our way then. Wouldn't want to delay further the foundation of a new government.
No, I don't suppose we would.
Secretary Thomson.
You're Alexander Hamilton, the new Secretary of the Treasury. What brings you here?
Well, I heard that Vice President Adams and Arthur Lee held up your pay for the past few months since Congress dissolved.
Little I can do about that now, I'm afraid.
President Washington sends his regrets and would like to rectify the error.
Really?
I'll have the money sent to you directly.
That brings me a lot of peace. Thank you, Secretary Hamilton.
Well, please, sir, it's the least we can do for you after all your years of service to the country. President Washington sent you this letter to thank you for your service.
Well, tell him I'm very touched.
Your journals have been incredibly helpful, sir, in sorting out the financial state of this country. What will you do next? Run for Congress?
I'm done with Congress, sir, completely done.
Well, what about your memoirs then? If you even consented to an interview with one of these budding historians, they'd favor you considerably.
I couldn't.
Why not? I'm sure we'd all love to know what you know. You had a unique insight into the great men who founded the nation.
Great men. I should contradict all the histories of great events of the Revolution. Let the world admire the supposed wisdom and valor of our great men. Perhaps they may adopt the qualities that have been ascribed to them. I shall not undeceive future generations.
I wish you the very best, Mr. Thompson. I shall endeavor to succeed you appropriately.
You?
Oh, Congress is irrelevant. The executive power will wield power now. Goodbye, Secretary Thompson.
Mr. Hamilton, take care of my country.